Imagine quitting your 9 to 5 to go drifting across the continent, and what was meant to be a 3-month expedition turned into a 5-year of bliss traveling the continent of Africa. Of course, this didn't come easy for my next guest. There were challenges along the way, but she wrote a book about it to narrate the good, the bad, and the exciting. Well, of course, joining me right here on #Africa is Lerato Mogoatlhe. Thank you for your time and welcome.
Thank you so much.
Let's talk about you, of course, traveling the continent. You quit your 9 to 5, something not most of us can do just like that. But there's something about traveling which caught your attention, and you've been doing it ever since.
Yes, absolutely. I've always had wanderlust. I think from when I was about 8 or 9, I always knew I wanted to travel Africa and I wanted to experience all it has to offer, from my heritage and history to even just being a beach bum around the continent. So after a 4-day media trip to Accra, I decided that time had indeed come for me to start living my dream, and I just quit and left to wander off and drift.
Any challenges that you encountered along the way? I mean, we're talking budget, number one, probably language barrier, and you're in a foreign country alone.
Definitely budget. You know, I had never traveled before I started my trips, right? So I didn't really understand that when you're doing full-time traveling, you really do get to live from hand to mouth every single day. You have to be very, very conscious of how you spend, not my biggest friend. You have to be organized, not my biggest friend. And also I was working as a freelancer, and you know, those checks sort of come eventually. Yeah. So even though technically I had worked and money was coming into my account, it never really arrived on time. So I constantly ran out of money while I was traveling and had to learn how to ask people for help. I used to ask bus drivers for lifts. When I was in Kenya, in Kakuma, to go back to Nairobi, the police officers in that area pulled their money together to raise funds for me to get a bus ticket.
Yeah, and this just speaks to the spirit of Ubuntu, not just in South Africa, but across the continent, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Ubuntu, I think, is an African value, and it really defines all of us. And more than anything that I have experienced around the continent, more than the beauty, more than the heritage, more than the music festivals, more than all of it, it ultimately comes down to our humanity and how beautifully and wonderfully we hold each other with love.
So let's then talk about, some of the travel requirements that you had to go through. I think Africa still has some visa constraints, so traveling to other countries where it's not necessarily visa-free from South Africa to that particular country can be difficult.
It is. I mean, you know what? It's a nightmare. I'll be the first to say that I understand that visa fees are revenue, and I don't think that I'm entitled to them just because I'm an African. But would it be helpful if we didn't have to pay visas everywhere we have to go? Absolutely. Would it be very, very helpful of African leaders to commit to making the process easier? I mean, if I'm not going to move freely around the continent, can I at least just show up and then pay at the border? That wasn't always the case, and sometimes it is time consuming. It can end up being a push factor.
Right. Now, what's exciting as well about your experience is that you were kind enough to document for all of us who haven't necessarily traveled Africa in a book called Vagabond. Why did you write this book, and what is it all about?
It's about how 3 months in West Africa turns into 5 years of living around the continent full time, and how those 5 years turn into the story of my life. I still travel the continent extensively, and I really wanted to have one go-to place where all these experiences can be documented, but I also wanted to demystify the experience of traveling around Africa. Very often, and this is a pet peeve of mine, people talk about how difficult it is to cross African borders, but all borders are difficult to cross. Sometimes you're lucky and you get an immigration official who just looks at the documents, stamps them, and lets you to go through. In other places, you get places where you're racially profiled and you have to go into a room somewhere and be cross-examined, right? So when those experiences happen in Europe, in a European country, we don't turn around and say, I'll never go to Europe. But when that happens somewhere in Africa, then we say, I will never travel around Africa. Yeah. So I really, more than anything, I wanted to demystify stereotypes. I wanted to create a narrative that allows us, in particular Africans, to see our continent in a way that we really get to see in mass media, we really get to see in certain other avenues where we consume the content.
Yeah. And speaking about mass media, do you ever in your book talk about, tips on, what to do or how to carry yourself in a different country, or what to have, because I think at times, speaking of that stigma and myth, we think travel is only for the rich. You have to be booked in a luxurious, expensive hotel, travel business class. I carry the most expensive bag while traveling. You have to be Instagram perfect according to, society standards. But do you talk about some of those tips in here?
That is the dream, right? But actually, you know what? I thought of my travels as almost like going to my grandmother's house. You don't overthink it. You just pack up and you show up, right? You don't think, am I flying in first class? Am I going to be rich? And it really comes down to this. There are many different ways of traveling. Luxury travel is not the only way to travel. And more often than not, it is only for an elite few. So always think about destinations in the way that you think about your hometown. Even if you don't know what to expect, you do know that just like where you live, there will be 5-star hotels, there will be hostels, there will be in-betweens. Just like where you live, there will be private cabs, but there'll also be buses, there'll also be taxis. And so always remember, ultimately, the world is not that different. African countries are not that different in terms of infrastructure, in terms of how daily life unfolds.
Right. And before I let you go, any top 5, say, favorite destinations so far in the continent? I know it's fair because some of your African friends are watching. So they might be like, pick our country, please. But any top 5 you could just mention?
Absolutely. Ghana, Mali, Senegal, Kenya, Sudan. Okay, and Egypt.
Had to slot in the 6th one there. Well, thank you so much, Lerato, for your time.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, author of Vagabond, Lerato Mogoatlhe, also an avid African traveler, joining us right here on #Africa. But still on Mandela month, we, of course, in the month of July, we're celebrating an icon, a global African icon at that, Dr. Nelson Mandela. Let's take a look at how some South Africans celebrated and commemorated his legacy.
Various corporates in South Africa marked this year's Nelson Mandela Day by packing food to be distributed to poor communities across the country.
Please share your story.
It was organized by the Rise Against Hunger, which distributes food and other aid to vulnerable communities. The meal packs contained rice, soy beans, and soup mix.
If you can look around you, we're people from different cultures, different ages, different companies, and we're all coming together for one goal, to help feed the nation. So it just speaks to what Ubuntu is, and all coming together to help each other.
The 18th of July celebrates the birthday of Madiba. It's a call to action for people to spend at least 67 minutes performing acts of kindness in his honor. This is to mark Mandela's 67 years of activism. ENCA's very own team went painting at the Johannesburg Children's Home.
So I'm in charge now, making sure that we leave this place nice and clean as we found it, but rather zhuzhed up as well. As you've seen, the roof is done, the ceiling rather. We've now also painted the roof. So I'm performing managerial duties here.
The call to do good deeds in Mandela's name began in Johannesburg and New York in 2009, but it spread to the rest of the world. This year's Mandela Day marked the 101st birthday of the Nobel Peace Prize winner, who died in 2013 at the age of 95.
And that's where we leave it right here on #Africa. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Dumalon Otutwani. We'll see you again next week right here on ENCA. But we'll leave you with beautiful pictures from across the continent. And remember, you can tune in next week, but also tweet us at Africa_ENCA. Until then, goodbye.